September 23, 2023. Highland Ridge Elite Shooters Club, Greenwich, Connecticut. The morning mist clung to the manicured grounds as 42-year-old Catherine "Cat" Blackwood stepped out of her silver Bentley Continental at precisely 8:00 a.m. With her Hermès handbag and designer shooting jacket, she looked every inch the wealthy socialite, exactly what the club's members expected and precisely what they despised. The Highland Ridge Club was America's most exclusive shooting facility, where membership cost $50,000 annually, and the waiting list stretched 5 years. Members included Olympic champions, military snipers, and shooting sports legends who dominated competitions for decades. This was hallowed ground, where precision was religion and reputation was everything. As Catherine approached the registration desk for the National Precision Rifle Championship qualifying rounds, conversations stopped. The assembled shooters, overwhelmingly male, predominantly older, assessed the newcomer with barely concealed skepticism. To them, she represented everything wrong with their sport: money buying access that should be earned through skill and dedication. "Great. Another trust fund princess playing at being Annie Oakley," muttered Jake Stevens, a 3-time national champion, loud enough for Catherine to hear. Others nodded in agreement, already writing off the woman who'd obviously bought her way into their sacred competition through connections rather than competence. Catherine heard every word, but maintained her composure. She'd faced similar reception at countless venues throughout her shooting career, the assumption that wealth equaled incompetence, that privilege precluded skill. What they didn't know was that beneath her polished exterior lay one of the most naturally gifted shooters in American history. Her rifle case contained a custom-built precision instrument, worth more than most people's cars. But the real weapon was Catherine herself. 25 years of obsessive training had forged her into something the shooting world had never seen, a shooter whose technical ability transcended conventional limitations. As she signed her name on the competitor roster, Catherine knew she was about to shatter more than just records. She was about to destroy every assumption these men had made about her capabilities. Catherine Blackwood's relationship with firearms began at age 7, on her grandfather's ranch in Montana, far from the Connecticut mansion that would later define her public image. Her grandfather, Samuel "Bull" Morrison, was a legendary figure in competitive shooting who'd represented the United States in 3 Olympic Games during the 1960s and 70s. Bull Morrison saw something special in his granddaughter from their first trip to his private shooting range. While other children struggled to hold rifles steady, Catherine demonstrated natural stability and hand-eye coordination that impressed even her accomplished grandfather. More importantly, she possessed the mental discipline essential for precision shooting, the ability to slow her heart rate and control her breathing under pressure. Her early training was methodical and comprehensive. Bull taught Catherine that shooting was 90% mental preparation and 10% physical execution. She learned to read wind patterns, calculate ballistic trajectories, and most crucially, to achieve the meditative state where conscious thought disappeared and only instinct remained. These skills came naturally to Catherine in ways that amazed her grandfather. By age 12, Catherine was consistently outshooting adult competitors at local matches. Her scores in junior competitions were so exceptional that officials frequently checked her equipment for illegal modifications. Unable to believe that such accuracy was humanly possible, Catherine's response was always the same calm professionalism that would later characterize her adult career. The family's move to Connecticut when Catherine was 14 separated her from Bull's daily training, but not from her passion for shooting. She continued competing in junior events while attending exclusive private schools, often traveling thousands of miles to participate in major competitions. Her classmates viewed her hobby as eccentric, but Catherine understood it was far more than recreation. Bull Morrison died when Catherine was 16, leaving her a substantial inheritance and the knowledge that she possessed gifts that transcended normal human limitations. His final words to her were prophetic. "Catherine, you shoot like no one I've ever seen. Don't let anyone convince you that you're not destined for greatness." Her grandfather's death coincided with Catherine's first adult competition, where she finished second in a field of experienced competitors. The shooting community took notice of the teenage prodigy, but Catherine's focus was already shifting toward mastering the psychological aspects of competition that separated good shooters from legends. Catherine's college years at Harvard were defined by an unusual double life. By day, she excelled in psychology studies, fascinated by the mental processes that enabled peak human performance. By night and weekends, she dominated shooting competitions across New England, applying psychological principles to achieve accuracy levels that defied conventional understanding. Her undergraduate thesis explored the neuroscience of precision motor control, examining how elite athletes achieved superhuman consistency under pressure. Catherine's research wasn't purely academic. She was systematically deconstructing the mental processes that made her exceptional, seeking to understand and optimize her own abilities. The combination of formal psychology training and practical shooting experience created unique insights that Catherine applied to her own performance. She developed visualization techniques that allowed her to see bullet trajectories before firing. She mastered breathing patterns that lowered her heart rate to levels typically seen only in deep meditation. Most importantly, she learned to enter flow states where time seemed to slow, and her awareness expanded beyond normal human perception. Catherine's competition results during this period were unprecedented. She won every major collegiate shooting championship, often by margins so large that officials investigated her equipment and training methods. Her scores consistently exceeded what shooting sports scientists believed was humanly possible, leading to speculation about performance-enhancing techniques or equipment modifications. The attention was unwelcome. Catherine preferred to compete quietly, refining her skills without the pressure of media coverage or sponsor expectations. She understood that her abilities were extraordinary, but she also recognized that premature exposure could create distractions that would interfere with her continued development as a shooter. Her Harvard professors encouraged Catherine to pursue graduate studies in sports psychology, recognizing her unique combination of theoretical knowledge and practical expertise. However, Catherine's interests were shifting toward business applications of psychological principles, particularly in high-pressure decision-making environments. The foundation of Catherine's later business success was built during these college years, where she learned that the same mental disciplines that made her an extraordinary shooter could be applied to any field requiring precision, focus, and performance under pressure. Her shooting skills were becoming tools for broader success rather than ends in themselves. By graduation, Catherine had achieved everything possible in collegiate shooting while maintaining perfect academic performance. She was ready to apply her unique combination of skills to new challenges, though she continued training and competing privately to maintain her edge. Catherine's transition from college to the business world was seamless, applying the same methodical approach that had made her an exceptional shooter to building a technology empire. Her first company, developing psychological assessment tools for corporate hiring, leveraged her Harvard research and sold for $80 million when she was just 28 years old. The sudden wealth provided Catherine with complete freedom to pursue her interests without financial constraints. While most people assumed she would retire or pursue philanthropy, Catherine instead invested her time and money into becoming the best shooter in human history. Her approach was systematic and unprecedented in its scope and sophistication. Catherine built a private training facility on her Connecticut estate that surpassed Olympic-level resources. The complex included multiple ranges designed for different shooting disciplines, environmental simulation chambers that could replicate any weather condition, and advanced ballistics laboratories where she tested ammunition and equipment configurations. The facility operated in complete secrecy, known only to the select instructors Catherine hired. Her training team included former Olympic champions, military snipers, and sports scientists who worked under strict confidentiality agreements. Catherine spared no expense in acquiring the best expertise available, often paying consultants more than they could earn anywhere else in exchange for their exclusive focus on her development. The training regimen Catherine developed exceeded anything seen in professional shooting sports. She practiced 8 hours daily, 6 days per week, focusing not just on accuracy, but on consistency under varying conditions. Her sessions included shooting in simulated wind and weather conditions, at varying distances and angles, and under artificially induced stress designed to replicate competition pressure. Catherine's analytical approach to improvement was perhaps her greatest advantage. She recorded every shot, analyzed performance data with statistical software, and continuously refined her technique based on empirical results. Her shooting became a precisely engineered system rather than intuitive skill, though she maintained the natural abilities that had made her exceptional from childhood. Most importantly, Catherine's business success provided the perfect cover for her shooting activities. The public saw only a successful entrepreneur who occasionally participated in shooting sports as a hobby. No one suspected that she was systematically preparing to dominate her sport at levels previously considered impossible. By age 35, Catherine had achieved everything she had dreamed of in business while secretly becoming perhaps the most skilled precision shooter who had ever lived. Highland Ridge Elite Shooters Club represented everything exclusive and traditional about American competitive shooting. Founded in 1923, the club occupied 500 pristine acres in Greenwich, Connecticut, where membership was limited to 200 individuals who represented the absolute elite of shooting sports. The waiting list was legendary, and membership required sponsorship by 3 current members, plus approval by the board of directors. The club's atmosphere was deliberately intimidating to outsiders. The Tudor-style clubhouse contained trophy rooms, displaying Olympic medals, national championship awards, and photographs of members with presidents and foreign dignitaries. Every surface reminded visitors that they were in the presence of shooting sports royalty, men who had dominated competitions for decades and considered themselves guardians of their sports traditions. Catherine had applied for membership 3 years earlier, finally gaining acceptance through a combination of her business reputation and substantial financial contributions to the club's endowment. However, acceptance didn't mean welcome. Many members resented her presence, viewing her as someone who had bought access to their exclusive world, rather than earning it through shooting accomplishments. The club's competitive culture was intensely masculine and hierarchical. Newcomers were expected to prove themselves through years of subordinate participation before being accepted as equals. Women were technically welcome, but subtly discouraged through social pressure and institutional traditions that made them feel unwelcome. Catherine was only the 14th woman ever admitted to membership. Her presence at club events was tolerated rather than celebrated. Members made polite conversation, but clearly considered her an outsider who would eventually lose interest and stop attending. The assumption was that her participation was motivated by social climbing rather than genuine passion for shooting sports. The club's training facilities were exceptional, featuring ranges designed for every shooting discipline and equipment that most competitors could never afford to access. However, Catherine rarely used the club facilities for serious training, preferring the privacy and advanced capabilities of her home range. Her visits to Highland Ridge were primarily social obligations rather than training sessions. The National Precision Rifle Championship qualifying rounds being held at Highland Ridge represented the most prestigious competition in American shooting sports. Winners would advance to nationals, where they would compete against Olympic champions and world record holders. For most club members, simply qualifying was the achievement of a lifetime. Catherine's decision to compete publicly for the first time in years had shocked the shooting community, and particularly Highland Ridge members, who had dismissed her as a hobbyist. September 23, 2023 dawned clear and calm at Highland Ridge, with perfect conditions for precision shooting. Wind speeds were minimal, visibility was unlimited, and temperatures were ideal for consistent ballistic performance. The weather couldn't have been better for the National Precision Rifle Championship qualifying rounds. Catherine arrived early, as was her habit, to acclimatize herself to the range conditions and prepare her equipment with the methodical precision that characterized everything she did. Her rifle case contained a custom-built instrument that represented the pinnacle of precision shooting technology, though to casual observers it appeared unremarkable. The other competitors were already engaged in their warm-up routines when Catherine began her preparation. She noticed their equipment choices, shooting positions, and mental preparation techniques with the analytical eye that had served her well in business. Most were using standard competition rifles and conventional techniques that hadn't evolved significantly in decades. Jake Stevens, the 3-time national champion, was holding court with a group of competitors near the 600-yard firing line. His voice carried clearly across the range as he discussed his recent victories and offered advice to younger shooters who hung on his every word. Stevens represented the old guard of competitive shooting, accomplished, confident, and utterly convinced of his own superiority. "I hear the rich lady thinks she can play with the big boys today," Stevens announced loudly enough for Catherine to hear. "Maybe she'll learn something about real shooting before she goes back to her country club." His comment drew knowing laughter from the gathered competitors who shared his assessment of Catherine's capabilities. Catherine continued her preparation routine without acknowledging the commentary. She had heard similar dismissals throughout her shooting career, and had learned that the best response was simply to let her performance speak for itself. Her mental preparation included specific techniques for blocking out distractions and maintaining focus despite hostile environments. Her rifle was a masterpiece of precision engineering, custom-built by the world's finest gunsmiths and optimized specifically for her shooting style and physical characteristics. Every component had been selected and adjusted to maximize accuracy under the specific conditions she would face during competition. The rifle was an extension of Catherine's will, calibrated to translate her intentions into perfect shot placement. As the competition preparation period neared its end, Catherine felt the familiar calm that preceded her best performances. Her heart rate was controlled, her breathing was steady, and her mind was entering the focused state that had enabled her greatest achievements. The National Precision Rifle Championship qualifying format was brutal in its simplicity. 5 strings of 10 shots each at distances ranging from 300 to 1,000 yards, with competitors eliminated after each string until only the top qualifiers remained. The first string was at 300 yards, considered routine for experienced shooters, but demanding enough to separate serious competitors from amateurs. Catherine was assigned to firing point 12, positioned between 2 former Marine Corps snipers who had dominated military shooting competitions for years. The placement wasn't accidental. Match officials often grouped competitors by perceived skill level, and Catherine's position indicated that she was considered a middle-tier participant at best. As competitors settled into their firing positions, the range fell silent, except for the sound of rifle bolts closing and safety flags being removed. The atmosphere was electric with concentration and competitive tension. Every shooter understood that their first string performance would set the tone for the entire competition. Catherine's shooting position was flawless, the result of thousands of hours of practice that had optimized every aspect of her technique. Her breathing pattern was controlled and rhythmic, her rifle hold was rock steady, and her trigger control was so precise that the rifle fired at the exact moment she intended without any disturbance to her aim. Her first shot broke perfectly, the rifle recoiling straight back without any lateral movement that might affect accuracy. Through her spotting scope, Catherine could see that her bullet had struck the 10 ring precisely where she had aimed. The shot was technically perfect, but she showed no emotion. First shots meant nothing in precision rifle competition. The other competitors were beginning their strings with typical results. Most shots were hitting the target center, but the groups were spreading as shooters fought wind conditions and equipment variations. Catherine could hear the subtle differences in rifle reports that indicated how well other competitors were managing their equipment and conditions. By her 5th shot, Catherine had established a pattern that was drawing attention from nearby competitors. Her shots were impacting in an impossibly tight group, with variations measured in fractions of inches rather than the typical spread of several inches. The consistency was beyond anything the other shooters had seen in competition. Jake Stevens, shooting at point 8, was beginning to notice that something unusual was happening at point 12. His own group was excellent by normal standards, but Catherine's performance was operating at a different level entirely. Stevens found his concentration wavering as he tried to understand how anyone could shoot with such mechanical precision. Catherine completed her first string with characteristic calm, her 10 shots forming a group that measured less than 2 inches at 300 yards. The performance was exceptional, but not unprecedented. Several other competitors had achieved similar accuracy. However, her consistency and technique had impressed the range officers who were beginning to pay closer attention to her performance. The second string moved competitors back to 600 yards, where wind conditions and equipment precision became critical factors. At this distance, tiny variations in technique or environmental conditions could cause shots to miss the target completely. Many competitors who had shot well at 300 yards would struggle with the increased difficulty. Catherine's preparation for the 600-yard string was methodical and comprehensive. She spent several minutes studying wind indicators throughout the range, noting subtle variations in air movement that could affect bullet trajectory. Her experience and training had taught her to read environmental conditions with almost supernatural precision. Her equipment adjustments were minimal, but critical. The scope settings and shooting position that had worked at 300 yards required slight modifications for the longer distance. Catherine's movements were economical and purposeful, reflecting the thousands of hours she had spent perfecting her technique under varying conditions. The other competitors were beginning to struggle with the increased distance. Shots that had been centered at 300 yards were now scattered across the target face as shooters fought wind drift and elevation errors. Several competitors were already showing signs of frustration as their scores dropped significantly from their first string performance. Catherine's first shot at 600 yards was perfect, a center hit that established her 0 for the string. Her subsequent shots continued the pattern of mechanical precision that had characterized her 300-yard performance. By her fifth shot, she had established a group that was smaller than most competitors could achieve at 300 yards. Jake Stevens was beginning to realize that he was witnessing something unprecedented. His own shooting was excellent by any reasonable standard, but Catherine's performance was operating beyond the normal limits of human capability. Her consistency was so perfect that it seemed mechanical rather than human. The range officers were now openly watching Catherine's performance with fascination and growing disbelief. Her 600-yard group was measuring less than 3 inches, a level of accuracy that approached the theoretical limits of what was possible with competition equipment under field conditions. Other competitors were beginning to notice Catherine's performance as well. Conversations during the break between strings focused increasingly on the woman who was shooting with unprecedented precision. The initial mockery was being replaced by grudging respect and growing amazement at what they were witnessing. Catherine remained focused and calm throughout the attention. She had expected her performance to draw notice and was prepared for the psychological pressure that came with being the center of attention. Her mental training had prepared her for exactly this scenario. As the second string concluded, Catherine had established herself as the clear leader, with a performance that was beginning to approach legendary status. The final string at 1,000 yards separated true precision shooters from everyone else. At this extreme distance, atmospheric conditions, equipment precision, and shooter skill combined to create challenges that eliminated all but the most exceptional competitors. Many shooters considered simply hitting the target at 1,000 yards to be an achievement. Catherine's preparation for the ultimate test was more intensive than any previous string. She spent 20 minutes studying wind conditions, noting subtle patterns and variations that would affect bullet flight during the nearly 2-second journey to the target. Her analysis was so comprehensive that other competitors began watching her preparation routine, hoping to learn from her technique. The shooting conditions were challenging but manageable. Wind speeds were variable but not excessive, and visibility remained excellent throughout the range. However, at 1,000 yards, even minimal environmental factors could cause shots to miss the scoring rings entirely. The margin for error was measured in fractions of degrees and tiny variations in technique. Catherine's rifle configuration for 1,000 yards represented the culmination of years of development and testing. Every component had been optimized for this specific distance and shooting condition. Her ammunition was custom-loaded to specifications that had been refined through thousands of test shots and computer modeling. Her first shot at 1,000 yards was perfection, a center hit that established her as a serious contender for the range record. The shot demonstrated not just accuracy, but consistency with her previous strings, indicating that her performance wasn't fluctuating with distance or conditions. Jake Stevens was struggling with the 1,000-yard challenge. His shots scattered across the target as he fought wind conditions and equipment limitations. Watching Catherine's performance, he began to understand that he was witnessing something that transcended normal competitive shooting. Her technique and equipment were operating at levels he had never encountered. By her 7th shot, Catherine had established a group that was approaching the national record for 1,000-yard precision shooting. Range officers were openly staring at her target through spotting scopes, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Her consistency was so perfect that it seemed to defy the laws of physics. The atmosphere on the firing line had changed completely. Other competitors had stopped focusing on their own shooting to watch Catherine's performance. The woman they had dismissed as a wealthy amateur was demonstrating shooting skills that none of them had ever seen in competition. Catherine's mental state was the calm focus that characterized her best performances. She was aware of the attention and the significance of what she was achieving, but her concentration remained fixed on the technical execution of each shot. Her psychological training was enabling her to perform at peak levels despite the pressure. As she prepared for her final shots, Catherine knew she was on the verge of achieving something unprecedented in American shooting sports. Catherine's 8th shot at 1,000 yards struck the 10 ring with mechanical precision, maintaining the impossible consistency that had characterized her entire performance. The group she was building was now smaller than the existing national record, with 2 shots remaining to cement her place in shooting sports history. The range had fallen completely silent, except for the sound of Catherine's breathing and the occasional click of her rifle's action. Every person present understood they were witnessing something extraordinary, a performance that would be discussed and analyzed for decades to come. Her 9th shot was perfection incarnate, striking the target so close to her previous impacts that range officers had to use high-powered spotting scopes to confirm it was a separate hole. The group was now measuring less than the existing record, with 1 shot remaining to make it official. Jake Stevens had stopped shooting entirely, his attention focused completely on Catherine's final shot. The 3-time national champion who had mocked her just hours earlier was about to witness his sports hierarchy completely rearranged by someone he had dismissed as incompetent. Catherine's final shot preparation was methodical and unhurried despite the enormous pressure. She went through her complete routine: wind assessment, breathing control, sight picture verification, with the same calm precision that had characterized every previous shot. Her mental state was the perfect focus that elite athletes achieve when everything aligns. The shot broke with perfect surprise, her rifle recoiling straight back as the bullet began its journey toward immortality. Through her scope, Catherine watched the bullet's trace until it struck the target with finality that ended speculation about her capabilities. The range officers confirmed what everyone already knew. Catherine's final group measured 4.7 inches at 1,000 yards, shattering the previous national record by more than 2 inches. The performance represented the finest precision shooting in American history, achieved by someone the shooting community had dismissed as an amateur. The aftermath was stunned silence followed by genuine applause from competitors who understood they had witnessed greatness. Jake Stevens was among the first to congratulate Catherine, his earlier mockery replaced by honest admiration for what she had accomplished. Catherine's response was characteristically modest. She thanked her competitors for their sportsmanship and acknowledged the years of training that had made her performance possible. However, privately, she understood that she had achieved something that validated every hour of practice and every sacrifice she had made. The record would stand as testament to what was possible when natural talent, unlimited resources, and obsessive dedication combined with perfect execution under pressure. Catherine Blackwood had shattered more than a national record. She had redefined what the shooting community thought was humanly possible.